everyone, my name is Sarah Ostman, and I am the Communications Manager in the American Library Association's Public Programs Office. Thank you for joining us today for Oral History at Your Library, a Beginner's Guide. I have just a couple of quick announcements before we get started. Today's webinar is offered as part of Latino Americans' 500 Years of History, a public programming initiative of ALA and the National Endowment for the Humanities. We are really excited about this project. Over the next year, more than 200 libraries and other institutions around the country will be holding film screenings, hosting festivals, collecting oral histories, and offering other programming related to Latino American history and culture. If you want to learn more, you can visit our website, which is ala.org/LatinoAmericans. Now, as you may know, ALA's Public Programs Office offers grants to help libraries fill their role as cultural community centers. We now have two opportunities available. The first is the Great Stories Club, which is a reading and discussion program that gives at-risk youth the chance to read, reflect, and share ideas on topics that resonate with them. The awards are available to libraries of all types that are located within or working in partnership with organizations that serve at-risk young adults. The deadline for that one is September 15th. We are also accepting applications for Explore Earth, Explore Tech, and Explore Space, free traveling exhibitions on STEM topics. These exhibitions require only 200 square feet of space, so they're great for smaller spaces. That opportunity is available to public libraries only, and the deadline is September 18th. Now, just a couple quick notes about the online classroom today. Feel free to download today's slides and a list of oral history resources in the Related Files for Download box in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. That box will be disappearing in a minute, but we will bring it back up at the end of the webinar. If you have questions while our presenters are speaking, you can type it into the chat box. We'll do our best to respond as we go along, and if we don't get to your question, we'll come back to it during the Q&A at the end of the presentation. This session is being recorded, and the archive will be available shortly after today's webinar completes. You can find that recording and many, many other recordings at programminglibrarian.org/learn. And finally, if you experience technical problems during today's session, please send a private message to Brian Russell. To do that, just hover over Brian's name on at the top of the attendees list and select Start Private Chat With. Now I'd like to introduce our presenters. Jeff Corrigan has been the oral historian for the State Historical Society of Missouri at the University of Missouri since 2008. He oversees all aspects of the oral history program, from interviewing to final processing, and conducts numerous public outreach programs and workshops each year. Mary Larson is the Associate Dean for Special Collections at the Oklahoma State University Library, where she joined the faculty in June 2009 as Director of the Oklahoma Oral History Research Program. Mary has been conducting oral histories for 25 years and is a past president of the Oral History Association. Just to give you a quick idea of the plan for the next 40 minutes, we're going to start with Jeff, who will give us an introduction to oral history. Then Mary will talk about programming ideas. Jeff will talk about resources, and Mary will cover technology. I would now like to turn the mic over to Jeff.
Hi everybody, Mary and I are glad you're here. Thanks for joining us today. We are excited to have you here and talk to you about oral history. As Sarah said, I'm at the University of Missouri for the State Historic Society of Missouri. We're a department of the University of Missouri system. Our oral history holdings are about 4,800. We not only conduct them ourselves, but we also are a repository that accepts them from different groups. I'll talk about that a little bit later. My primary collecting areas, just to give you an idea of the breadth and scope of what we collect in, I primarily collect environmental oral histories. We collect thousands of veterans, specifically POWs. We collect political interviews. We collect interviews on the newspaper industry. We collect interviews on people who attended or went to one-room schoolhouses. We have some newer projects. We collect on desegregation and civil rights in Missouri. And my newest project the last few years is I collect interviews with people who were affected by the Joplin tornado. So you can just see right from there, there's a wide range of things that you can collect in and that you can be a part of. So to begin with, what is oral history? It's a collection of first-hand information. It's recorded in some type of medium, whether it be audio or video. It's getting people's memories, their personal their insights to historical events. There's two types of oral histories, primarily. There's life histories, so that might be where you're chronicling somebody's entire life, where you're starting at the beginning and taking them up to the present time. So that might be what I do for a environmental interview. I just interviewed a fish biologist a few weeks ago, so we went from as early as he could remember to present day. And then there's topical oral histories. So these are touching on specific subjects or time periods from an individual's life. So these are usually the ones I'm doing, for example, with my one-room schoolhouse collection. At most, somebody could have attended for up to 8 years, and so we'd cover that brief time period in their life. So what is it about oral history that can contribute to our knowledge? Oral history can be used in collaboration with a lot of other sources. It can bring more depth and life to a topic. It can add that human element that can often be lacking in many resources, for example, with government documents. It adds depth to an already well-known story. An example I have is we had some National History Day students from Briscoe, Missouri. They did a project called The Survivor's Tale, The Legacy of Ellie Gross, in which Ellie Gross is a Holocaust survivor. And they sought out her, they interviewed her, they incorporated that into their project. They ended up going to nationals, in which Ellie Gross herself came to their presentation, saw it, and met with them. So that interview brought a whole nother depth and aspect and a side to their project that they couldn't have gotten without speaking to somebody and talking to somebody personally. It gets the story of both elite and ordinary. So for example, you might say, well, the main business in town is this factory, and that's where all the jobs have come from. So we want to interview the factory owner for the last 50 years. But with that, you might also want to interview the floor manager, for example, who might also have ran the shop for 30 years. You want to make sure you get all sides of a story, all sides of your community, all sides of your project if possible. It helps to chronicle underrepresented communities. So for example, I'm going to talk a little bit later about two Latino projects, but one I can think of is Daniel Kerr. He's a professor at the American University in Washington, D.C. He's a public history professor, and he worked with the Cleveland Homeless Oral History Project. Obviously, the homeless are an underrepresented group, and so his project surrounded around that, and he has a good book out about that you could look up. Moving on to the next slide there. There are lots of key elements of oral history. These are only a few. I'm going to briefly touch on things such as copyright. We're going to talk about an interview setting, a little bit more on collection of first-hand information. We're going to talk a little bit about equipment, but Mary's going to come back later and talk about specifically about some equipment and some resources for you. We're going to talk about a little bit about processing, if you take oral histories into your collection or whether you decide to start your own project. And then we're going to talk about a provision for making them available, which is a key element to oral history. And this is where libraries can come in. I'm going to go through each one of these, so don't worry if you haven't got a chance to look at these in depth. You'll see each of them individually come up next. So copyright. I want you to know that as soon as an oral history is completed, as soon as you turn the recorder off, it is copyrighted, whether it be audio or video. That interview is copyrighted the second it's stopped. Know that no one should ever be recorded without their knowledge and consent. So we always want people to have that knowledge that they know they're being interviewed, they know that this is going to be made public, and it's going to be a part of your institution or your library archives. Now, whether or not you are starting your own oral history project or accepting them into your collection, I really want you to think ahead about gathering things like release forms, deeds of gifts, consent forms, some type of paperwork trail that says that, these people know that they're being recorded, they know that you have them, and they know that they're going to be made available to the public. Just a little bit about ethics. The one thing you should be a little bit worried about in your collection is that you want to be careful that interviews that you give access to are not full of libel and slander. And specifically, I want to talk a little bit about the Boston College Belfast case. You may or may not have heard that, but I want you to think about when you put a restriction on something, know that you may close it in your archives, but know that oral history is not, that closing of it is not going to stand up to a subpoena. So you can't promise that things will indefinitely be closed until a certain time. It will not stand up to a subpoena, and we learned that through the Boston College Belfast case. And the other thing about restrictions I want to kind of steer you away from is sometimes people have a tendency to put, I'd like this to be made available upon my death, but that puts the burden on you, the librarian, you, the archives, you to track down these people when they pass. I suggest if you have to put a restriction on something, pick a date in the future that can be agreeable to everyone. You can also, whether it be 10 years, 20 years, you don't want to go too far in the future, but, you want to make sure that the person being interviewed who's sharing their story is, agreeable to the date you've picked. But try to steer clear upon death, because that really leaves the burden on the librarian or the archivist. A controlled, recorded interview setting. I cannot express how great libraries are for this. They often have quiet rooms that can be reserved. But I do have a question for you. Do you allow outsiders from outside of your school, your community? Could they reserve a room and conduct oral histories with your community members? That's one thing I kind of run into occasionally, is I may be in a town to interview a community member, but I'm actually not allowed to reserve a room. So think about if your policies would allow for that. Libraries are great because they often have great accessible parking. They have restrooms. Newer buildings are ADA compliant. But regarding the rooms, does your library actually advertise your room availability? Are the directions easy to understand? Do you actually suggest reasons why people might be able to reserve your room? Do you simply say for quiet study or for individual use, or can you throw out things there like to conduct an interview, to conduct an oral history interview? Sometimes I think if people put out the suggestions, people might be, your community, your patrons might be more, they might have more an idea that, oh yes, I can do that at the library. Not everyone's willing to ask if the space you have can be used for their purpose. So I encourage you to think about putting as much information as you can about your space, how they can reserve that. Could they do this kind of project there? So just think about those kind of things. So key elements of oral history. One of the main things is that you're collecting first-hand information. I love this quote by Jackie Bonadinsky. She's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. She's here at the University of Missouri. And she says you're putting people back in the movie of your life. And you really are. You're asking that person, what did they see? What did they experience? What do they remember? They can really, you can go in depth with these individuals and you can really learn a lot. And, if you're asking the right questions and they're giving good information, you really can see it as a movie as you're conducting the interviews or listening to them. But great quote by Jackie. So another key element is the use of high quality sound or video equipment. I suggest you get the equipment that works best for you, your budget, and your project. And Mary's going to talk about this, how to approach buying equipment a little bit later. Notice I put sound or video. For example, here at our archive, we only do sound interviews for a number of reasons. But if you're going to do video, I do think you need to think about a few more things. How many people are going to be involved? You're going to need somebody to run that camera that's also not trying to conduct an interview, especially if you're new to oral history. It can be very difficult when you're trying to focus on two different things. You're going to have larger storage issues to keep those digital files. And then you're going to have to think about setting too. What's the background going to be? What is, is it just simply a white wall that's in the study room at the library, or can you make it a little bit more appealing aesthetically if you're doing video? I encourage you all to consider putting together an oral history field kit that could be checked out. You may have to adjust the times that could be checked out. If it's, say, a community group, can you check it out to them for a month? If it's an individual, can they check it out for a week, say, to conduct several interviews? If you can't create a field kit, what about providing access to equipment in-house? And I'm going to give an example that came up here. The Daniel Boone Regional Library, it is the library here in Columbia, Missouri. I knew that they had a green screen. I knew that they had a video camera. I knew they had a flatbed scanner. I knew all of this because we share a colleague of mine, Julie. She works part-time for us and she works part-time for the library. And I knew they had this stuff. And I was approached by a World War II veteran who, he had already done an oral history interview, but he was looking for a video memoir. He wanted to make a memoir for his wife and kids for his upcoming anniversary. Now, I mentioned that we only do audio here, so I couldn't help him. We don't have the video equipment to do that. But I knew they had it at the library, and I searched the library's website, and I couldn't quite tell if you could use things for the public. I called around, I got tossed around, I kept using the word makerspace, and the people answering the phone didn't quite know what that was. And then I kind of mentioned the green screen, the video camera, and they got me to the right person. Brandy, she was wonderful. We had a great chat, and they have since worked with this individual. They're definitely open now. I think I think this is going to be a common request in the future. Video memoirs, they can be easier than writing out a memoir, making a book. So the library, they now create 1.5 hour time slots where individuals in the community here in Columbia can make a time slot with them. They will help them if they want to scan any pictures that they have. They'll let the individual go for roughly an hour, and they will burn a copy for that individual. And so, by me asking the questions and kind of connecting them to, I think this is going to be a great service at the library. So they already had all the equipment. They just happened to use it all in-house. Now they aren't checking out the equipment, but this is now a service that's now available. So, a video memoir, this could be great for oral histories they could conduct inside of there. So if you can do this kind of service, please advertise it. Please, please, please advertise it and let people know that you're open and willing to do these kind of services to help your patrons out. Adherence to careful processing techniques. Planning ahead is key. I can't express this enough. Have a protocol to make sure that the interviews that you either collect, you bring into your collection aren't lost and deleted. The worst thing that could happen is you check out equipment to an individual, they send it back to you, they are waiting for their DVD, and the next person checks it out, and they delete the interview that took place before them. So have some type of process or check sheet. If you can provide this service and make sure you can come up with some type of workflow ahead of time. For example, I use a checklist, and on that checklist, I have things like the contact information of the interviewee I'm interviewing. What collection is this a part of? Any correspondence I've had with them. For example, I'll write down the date I sent the letter to them. I'll write down the date of the interview, the location and time of the interview. I'll write down to make sure I check a box that says, has a copy been provided to the interviewee? Has a CD been burned for the patron? Is there a patron access copy here? Have I stored it on our server? Have I stored it on an external backup, external hard drive? Do I have a signed deed of gift? This is tailored towards my project, but you could easily check with. I see somebody's asking a question, and yes, Chandra, Alex, if you emailed me, I'd be happy to send you a copy of it. Anybody, you can email me. I'd be happy to share it, or I can probably put it on my website and put it up there for you. But make sure you tailor your check sheet specific to your library and project. It'll make things go smoother, much easier later. So key provisions for making interviews accessible. This is kind of one key difference of oral history, say, than journalism, is that we want these interviews, they're not the end, the end product, can be many things. It could be a news story, it could be a documentary, but the interview themselves, we want to make them accessible. Many of you already have these things. You have a local history section. You have special collections. You have archives. If you start an oral history project or you decide to accept them into your collection, who will you accept them from? Will it be students and faculty? If you're an academic library, if you're a public library, will you accept them from community groups and nonprofits? But how will you make them available? How will you make them discoverable? How will they be accessible? Just don't let the collection sit on the dust and the shelf. So work with your catalogers. Make sure that you can make things accessible. So I'm actually going to turn this over to Mary now, and she's going to talk to you about programming ideas.
Okay, well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on your time zone. I'm going to start by talking a little bit about programming ideas. I think the first thing that you want to do is identify your goals. In order to get a sense of what types of oral history programming will work best for your library, you really want to identify what you hope to accomplish. Are you trying to educate people about a particular topic, whether it's history or culture or science or art? As Jeff mentioned, there are oral history projects that address a wide array of subjects, so they aren't just focused on local history. Maybe you're trying to build a greater sense of community, or it could be that you're trying to fill gaps in the local or regional historical record. One of the things that oral history is very good for is showcasing the stories of individuals and communities that have been traditionally underdocumented. So it's obviously a perfect fit for that sort of thing. Maybe you're looking for a summer project for younger people, or you have a wonderful group of older volunteers who are really enthusiastic but don't yet have a specific focus for all of their energy. Or, as is often the case, maybe you had a cancellation in your programming and you just have an empty slot that you have to fill, and you're trying to find a way to use local stories to fit in the schedule. Oral history can be a fantastic way to address any of these goals. But you just want to first be clear about what your objectives really are before you start planning. It also helps the process along if you can do a quick inventory of your resources. What do you have in the way of volunteers? What do you have in the way of funding? With those two, if you don't have one, the other can often help you get things done. So it's important to kind of get a bead on that. If you don't have enough volunteers or funding, are there local community groups whose aid you could enlist? I've been involved with a number of really successful collaborations like that over the years, and it's a wonderful way to get people invested in the work of the library who might not otherwise be tied into what you're doing. Also, what kind of equipment do you have access to? As Jeff mentioned earlier, many public libraries these days, many university libraries have maker spaces, and they have equipment for checkout, particularly video recorders or GoPros, and college and university libraries can partner with other departments on campus to use equipment that they might have. So see what your existing options are before you plan on purchasing anything. I will be talking a little more about that later, how to actually choose your equipment later on in the webinar. When you combine your understanding of your goals with your inventory of resources, or even potential resources, then you'll have a better sense of the types of projects you'll be able to undertake. And I want you to realize this isn't a limiting factor. This isn't meant as a limiting factor. If you have goals that go beyond your current resources, by all means, plan for fundraising, plan for friend building, or whatever additional things you might need. I just want to be sure that resources are part of your equation when considering projects. And I noticed that some people are saying there might be some issues with my mic. I'm going to turn this up just a touch. Is anybody getting feedback? Does that sound a little better? You can let me know. Okay. Continuing on. There are two primary approaches to programming with oral history, and they're fairly obvious. You can either use existing oral histories to create your programming, or you can generate new ones. And here are some things you'll need to consider depending on which approach you choose. Existing oral histories can be incredibly useful for certain types of topics. If you want to do an educational program on a particular topic, extant interviews are a great way to bring oral history in without having to start an entire project of your own. For example, you might decide to celebrate Women's History Month by presenting a lecture on a local Latina artist, and in doing your research, you find that she was interviewed for a nearby university's oral history program. You could then work with them to get the necessary rights to incorporate part of their material into your lecture or into an exhibit or whatever types of programming you might be doing. If for National Hispanic Heritage Month you're planning to do a series of book conversations on novels by Latino authors, you can link to oral histories as supplementary information either for the discussion leaders or for all the group members. Or if you're celebrating your community's centennial and you want to bring in perspectives other than just the original pioneers, you can look for local oral history projects that documented diverse groups who would add some greater depth to your understanding of your town's history. Additionally, for younger patrons of your library, local stories from oral histories can be used with young adult programming, and for school libraries, they can be incorporated into local history curricula, so there are a lot of options there. So you might be wondering how to find existing oral histories. As much as librarians generally hate to hear a variation on this theme, one good way is to use Google. Many oral history programs have either their interviews or their finding aids available online, and they are regularly crawled by Google, so this is one valid search option, together with checking the more usual sources, such as local library catalogs or WorldCat. Another option is to look at the Oral History Association's website. It's the main professional organization in the U.S. for oral historians, and it has two web pages that might be of interest. First is their list of collections and programs, which would allow you to identify at least some projects in your area. And second, they have a list of state and regional oral history organizations. So if you can't find anything using the first resource, someone at one of these associations might be able to help you. I know most, or at least an awful lot of these folks, and they're almost without fail unwaveringly nice and helpful. So I'm sure they would have no problem if you contacted them as well. If you do want to use existing oral histories, I do have one caveat. Once you've identified some useful interviews, please contact the holding repository just to be sure that you can use the material you want for your presentation or project and that there aren't any restrictions on it that you might need to know about. Now, generating new oral histories is a helpful approach for a range of objectives, including, first, building a better sense of community, since you can include a wide variety of people in the planning and work and can document an equally wide variety of perspectives. And following up on that, it's a good way to engage volunteers of all ages. Jeff noted earlier how oral history is wonderful for filling gaps in the historical record. And if balancing that record is one of your goals, this is definitely something you might want to consider. Finally, being involved in an actual oral history project educates people on the process so they can use it themselves for things like family histories, genealogical work, or even other community-based cultural heritage projects. So that's something that they might, be able to take out into the community in a broader sense. If you decide that you want to do an oral history project at your library, how do you get started? Well, there are a number of non-exclusive options. One is to collaborate with an existing oral history program. You can be involved with some of the planning and work without having to shoulder the whole burden. And it's always simpler, I think, when you're working with a group who already has an existing workflow, tried and tested paperwork, and people who are trained in both interviewing and technical matters. Alternately, you could hire an oral historian, local or not, who could provide you with some training, and your library could then go it alone, except for the training part, of course, and run your own project completely separately from any existing projects. Now, I think it always helps to be collaborative with these things, or even if you're not working together with another group, at least be aware of what other people are doing. That's always good form, but you could be doing something on your own with that sort of communication with other groups. Finally, you could provide local community members with equipment that they could check out for interviews, and rather than organize a formal project, you could let people gather interviews as they have time and inclination. While this third idea is always an option, I wouldn't recommend proceeding with that one without at least some sort of training in oral history methods, since otherwise you kind of leave yourself open to all sorts of different problems. But if you get some volunteers trained, it's possible to do something like this at a less formal pace while still conducting interviews that will be of value. We did something called Oral History in a Box for ALA's Dust Bowl related traveling exhibit, Dust, Drought, and Dreams Gone Dry. And a number of the libraries associated with that, that particular exhibit did this sort of thing. So things that you'll need to consider. First, you're going to need equipment for both recording and playback if you're making these things available in your library, and we'll talk more about that later. Second, you want to be sure that if you're doing your own project that you get a representative selection of interviewees, since you want to reflect the makeup of the entire community. For example, if you're doing a set of interviews for Hispanic Heritage Month, you would want to talk to people from a well-rounded cross-section. If you had people living in your town from across Latin America, for example, you wouldn't just interview residents whose ancestors had come from Mexico, but also those who had roots in El Salvador, Chile, and Argentina. Third, you would want to make sure that you get release forms, as Jeff mentioned before. They're also referred to as deeds of gift, so that you have the ability to put these interviews in your archives and make them available to people. And I'll give a small note here. People in archives are used to releases that have just one signature, but oral history releases traditionally require signatures for both the interviewer and the interviewee. If you need samples, there are a number of forms available online as part of the Smithsonian's Folklife and Oral History Interviewing Guide. 4, if you want your interviews to be discoverable as well as accessible, you'll need to spend some time to process them. This doesn't mean you have to do full transcripts, but you will want to either index or summarize them in some way and then make that material available as a finding aid so that people can search. Last but certainly not least, if you're planning on generating new oral histories, you also need to plan for their preservation. Since they'll almost certainly be in digital format these days, this means making a commitment to keeping them safe and backed up and refreshing or migrating them according to best practice. A good source for some of these later issues is a book called Curating Oral Histories by Nancy McKay. All of this may sound like a lot to consider, but if you want to do an oral history project of your own, these are the types of things that will be important. Luckily, there are a lot of resources out there that are available to help you sort out all of these issues, and Jeff is going to talk about those next. So Jeff, I'll send this back to you.
All right, thanks, Mary. So I'm going to talk about a variety of resources. There are a ton of them out there. You can see I've listed books and other print materials. Does your library carry any books on oral history? Are they current in the field? Check that out. See how old they are. Things have changed, especially with the advancements of technology. There are a ton of organizations and institutions out there. They can provide you information, they can provide you training, they can give you examples. There are conferences, there are publications, there are workshops. There are a great number of resources out there. Here are 3 books that I personally like. The first, A Guide to Oral History and the Law by John Neuenschwander. It's published by Oxford University. It's tailored more for an academic library, or if you're starting your own program, there are examples of deeds of gifts and consent forms in there. The middle book there, The Oral History Manual by Barbara Summer and Mary Kay Quinlan, that is published by Altamira Press. This would be more for a community project, a public library, or if you're going to be doing, say, oral histories in a classroom, this would be good. It's set up more like a workbook. The third one there on the right-hand side, Do an Oral History by Donald Ricci. He just retired as a Senate historian for the U.S. Senate historian. It's published by Oxford. This is its 3rd edition. It'd be great for academic libraries, public libraries, and if you're starting your own program. What I like about this book is that it is in question and answer format. So if you're wondering how to curate it, there's a section on that. If you're wondering how to use it in a classroom, there's a section on that, and you can just go to that section. So I do like that book. Mary, my co-presenter, she has a book out. She co-edited. It's called Oral History and Digital Humanities, Voice, Access, and Engagement. It's a Palgrave publication. And as Mary mentioned, Nancy McKay's book, and Nancy, I see, is joining us here today, so hi, Nancy. But that publication is from Left Coast Press, and Left Coast Press has a lot of other oral history books, and I know there's several actually coming out this fall, too. So there's lots of resources if you're looking for books. Organizations. Mary mentioned the Oral History Association. Oral History, they're going to meet. The Oral History Association is going to meet in Tampa in October. Mary and I will be presenting there, actually along with Nancy. But what I like about this section here, this website, is if you look in the lower right-hand corner, there's a section called Principles and Best Practices. I think anybody who's ever going to conduct an oral history interview should read that. It's only a couple pages long. I really think it's a good. Just a very quick, brief introductory to having things, ethics and how to look at the interview process and just key things that you should know put out by the OHA. Here's another, there's an actual journal for oral history. It's published by Oxford. If you're an academic institution, check to see if your institution subscribes to this. You can see from the screenshot I took, the University of Missouri does subscribe to this. This is, more of scholarly works there, but there, you can see what a lot of book reviews are in there, a lot of media reviews, website reviews, full-length articles. It's a great publication to have. Another one institute I'd like to direct you to is the Baylor Institute for Oral History. If you look on the left-hand side, kind of fourth from the bottom, the workshop and resources section. What I like about their website is they have a free online PDF called An Introduction to Oral History. And this is really, if you had to condense oral history down to a quick 20-page PDF, this is the one I would direct you to. It's freely available online. You can freely distribute it to people. It's a great one. They also actually, if you're looking for oral history training, they offer, I think once or twice a year, they actually offer an online oral history class. I think it meets 2 or 3 times online. That's definitely an option out there, but I love that introduction to oral history. If, for example, if you're going to transcribe anything, they actually have a great transcription guide too. That's actually what we follow here at the State Historic Society of Missouri. So here's another one, Oral History in the Digital Age. It is actually funded by IMLS. I like this website. It's, again, everything's free, but it has a lot of case studies on here. There are a lot of in-depth essays on here. You'll see that Mary's actually going to talk about a specific aspect of this this website in just a little bit when it comes to equipment. But this is a great website. Again, free information online. There's a listserv, H Oral Hist, and before anybody yells at me for suggesting another listserv, I'm going to say I really like this one for a couple reasons. First off, it is monitored by a handful of editors, so you don't get those things like spam. They don't allow solicitations. They don't allow those all reply alls that say congratulations, thank you, all those things that can make us kind of fill our inboxes. They don't do that. I set it up. I get a weekly feed if there's anything going on, and then I like that I can search the archives for many times if you have a question, it's already been asked and answered, and you can search for that there. So I'm a big fan of this listserv. But to coincide with Latino American history, 500 years of it, I pulled out a couple examples. This is the Bracero Archive. This is the Bracero program, I guess, just to give a little background, was an initiative in the 1942 to 64, and there was approximately 4.6 million Mexican agricultural workers that came to the United States. They came all over the United States. And this website, which you can see, you can browse the archives both in English and Spanish. It's full of not just oral histories, but it also has things like images, documents, oral histories. This was a collaboration. It still is. You've got the Brown University, the Smithsonian National Museum of American History, the Institute of Oral History at the University of Texas, El Paso, Christine Navarro McElhaney, she was involved in this project, and we're actually going to give you her information towards the end of this project, or the end of the webinar. But this is one example of a current project and the website for this is in our resource guide that you can get at the end here. But this is one example of a project that can be done. This is another one. This is from the University of Florida, their Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. In 2004, they started the Diaspora Latino in the Americas project. They shortened it to LDAP. This is a great project. It was started by students. It's got over 100 interviews in there now, but diaspora is the movement of people from their homeland or from their homeland and back and vice versa to the United States. And so this is a new project, fairly new, but this is a great example if you're looking to do something or looking for Latino interviews to use in a project or incorporate into it. Regardless of whatever your topic may be that you're looking for, make sure to see what others have done. You don't always have to reinvent the wheel. So regardless of whatever your topic is, that's kind of why I mentioned those at the beginning, all the different types of projects I do. Somebody might be working on it. So make sure you look and see what other people have done so you can help you prepare for your own project. You might also be able to seek out partners and collaborate on this. So with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Mary, and she's going to talk to you about technology.
Okay, so now that you all have a sense of what oral history is, what your programming options are, and what resources are available, you'll need to think about your equipment, which we have more frighteningly titled here as technology. As with the earlier sections, there are options. There are always options, and there are really good options in this case. If you are lucky enough to have money with which to purchase equipment, you're going to make your decision based on how much money you have and on why you're purchasing the recorders. Are you buying equipment for a library-based project, or are you buying equipment that will be checked out to a large number of volunteers or to the public? That will make a difference. If you aren't fortunate enough to have money for equipment, look back to that resource inventory we talked about at the beginning and see if there's any way that a local public radio station or another cultural heritage organization like a museum or historical society might be able to loan you equipment. Also, be aware that you can use iPads and tablets and laptops as recording devices if you get a small external microphone. There's information online about how to do this. Most libraries have these for checkout, and people don't realize that they can stand in for more elaborate digital recorders. If you're looking to buy a digital setup, there are two great online resources you can use. The first, and I think the most up-to-date, is called Ask Doug, which was part of the IMLS-sponsored project Jeff just referred to, Oral History in the Digital Age. Ask Doug walks you through a decision tree based on your needs and your funding. Andy Kolovos also hosts a wonderful set of reviews at the Vermont Folklife Center. It isn't updated quite as regularly, but it's a particularly good guide for those who might be borrowing equipment from another institution and are trying to determine if what they can get will work for what they want to do. Most of the time, if you're borrowing equipment from someone else, it's a couple of years old. So the lag in updating is actually really helpful here because it allows you to assess some slightly older digital recorders. This is what the Ask Doug page looks like, and you can get a sense of some of the questions if you have really good eyesight. But you can answer questions regarding resources, quality required, sturdiness desired. You can choose from a range of things that start with the basics of cost and purpose. That is, are you using it for class projects that don't need professional quality? Are you looking at entry-level professional quality or top-of-the-line quality? You can see that it lets you choose price points down to very low levels. There's an option for under $100, so there is a range of material out there. There are also additional choices on the left that allow you to address things like complexity, weight, size, portability, microphone options, all of that, as well as other features. And if you go to the website, you can take a look at that. Just going to give you a couple of hints beyond what you will get on these sites, although they may be echoed on those sites in different places. The first is, if you're getting equipment that will be checked out to the public, get the sturdiest setup that you can. A lot of these are rated on how sturdy they are. So look for something sturdy, and don't spend huge sums of money on something that might get destroyed on the first or second time out of the library. We all like to think this won't happen, but occasionally it does, so just keep that in mind. Two, if you have at least some money and will be using a limited group of staff or volunteers, try to get the best equipment you can reasonably afford. If there's some sort of control over who will be dealing with the equipment, its survival rate will almost certainly be higher, and you owe it to future generations of researchers who may want to use your interviews to create the highest quality record possible. And finally, please be sure that you're getting a recorder that can record in standardized formats like WAV files. The side note here is, please, if you can at all avoid it, don't record in an MP3 setting. MP3s are highly compressed, and while you can certainly use that format for copies of WAV files for online access, you can get much higher quality recordings using uncompressed formats for your originals. So I'd recommend that. Now, back to the overall issue of standardized formats. I do want to caution you that while many companies offer small, adorable little digital audio recorders, and Olympus is famous for this. I mean, bless their hearts, they have these just adorable little recorders, but a surprisingly high number of them will only record in proprietary formats that can't easily be used by people without specialized software or hardware. They aren't ubiquitous. So this is something that you don't want to get into, both for reasons of preservation and access. So please be aware of that when purchasing equipment. I think anything on Andy or Doug's lists would be perfectly fine, but if you're out hunting at your local box store, that's just a word of caution. I think at this point we're done with our part of the presentation, so now I'll throw this back to Sarah. Thanks all.
Yes, thanks Mary, and thank you Jeff. That was wonderful. We have about 15 minutes for questions. So if you would like to ask a question of either of our presenters, please type it in the chat box. You can also send me a private message by hovering over Sarah Ostman and click Start Private Chat, and then I will ask the question. Also, before I forget, all of the resources that have been mentioned over the past 45 minutes are all in that oral history resource guide, which just popped up on your screen. So do yourself a favor and download that document. It'll save you a lot of effort. We have a question already from Chandra and Alex. Can anyone speak to the benefits and
I can. I don't have a problem tackling that. Or unless
you
want to, Mary.
Tag team. Well, no, I'll tag team once you're done.
Okay. So you have to think about what are you going to do with these oral histories. So, for example, ours are going to be transcribed. They're going to become electronic PDFs. They're going to be in hard format, and researchers in our institution are going to keyword search them and use them as a primary source in their research, whether it be their book, paper, student paper, or whatnot. With video, storage is the key. How are you going to store them? They take many more gigabytes, especially with high definition cameras. The prices come down extensively. If I'm conducting an interview, I have to make sure I have somebody else with me. I have to think about things like lighting and setting. So to counter what I'm going to say though is, I say, for example, if your end product is that you want to highlight these interviews, you want to highlight them on your library's website, what I like to do is conduct all of the interviews and then pick out the parts that you like the most, and then pick one day in which you can invite all those interviewees back into your library, have a nice setup, professional equipment, have somebody that really knows what they're doing, and say, Mr. Smith, could you tell me about this story again that you told me in your interview? Or, Mrs. So-and-so, can you tell me about this interview? And then, if you only have somebody recorded for 3-5 minutes, I caution anything over 10, I don't think people will watch that online, then you can use that for your library. You can put it on your library's website. You can put that on YouTube. You can do all these other things with it. But the people are fresher. They're, they can think about what they're wearing. They can think about things like lighting and setting and all those things. So that's kind of how I like to approach it. What is the end product? What do I want to use this for? Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, and at our office here at Oklahoma State, we do both audio and video recording of all of our interviews. We're lucky enough to have the storage capacity to do that. I agree with Jeff that when you're starting out in an oral history project, it's a lot simpler when you're first trying to get your feet on the ground with a project to start with audio only. Because there are fewer moving parts, basically. The equipment's not as hard to learn. On the other hand, what we do, we don't require, we don't have a separate camera person. We set up a shot at the beginning, and we keep that shot throughout because we tend to use our material for YouTube videos. Our material gets used in university productions. So we use ours in a number of different ways. I do think, though, that if you're starting out with an oral history project, until you really know what kind of volunteers or what kind of resources you have, it's easier to start with audio. But I think there are some advantages to video, too, in that you get to see body language and some of the other context. So I think there can be arguments made both ways, and Jeff and I have talked about this a lot, but we both kind of agree that if you're just getting started, it's easier to start more simply with audio recordings, unless you have a lot of resources.
Donna had sort of a related question. She asked about conducting oral interviews by written correspondence. Such as sending standardized questions to potential interviewees to respond via email. Do either of you have experience with that?
Well
go ahead. No, go ahead, Mary.
I've done that for research purposes at times. When I haven't been able to do real oral history interviews with people, but I don't consider those oral history interviews. That doesn't mean they're not a valid way of gathering information. It just doesn't fall into the same genre, if you will. But I've done that a number of times for my own research when I haven't been able to get an opportunity to interview someone by phone or in person. But part of what oral history interviews do is allow you to respond to the answers that you get from people while while you're having that conversation. So, you have your standardized questions to start, but you ask follow-up questions as you go. And that's part of the dynamic, that back and forth with oral history, that I think allows it to be such a powerful tool. But it certainly is handy under a number of circumstances. Jeff, did you have?
I was going to say one alternative would be is if you can't be in the same location as the person, and say they're in a different state or whatnot, consider trying to do an interview over Skype. I mean, it's not ideal, but we have done it before. We had an interview with, Jules Pfeiffer and Tom Englehart, two editorial cartoonists, and we had to do that via Skype. We recorded the whole thing, but it was a question and answer. It's like they were together, but that is an alternative. So if if you could do it at your library, I'm sure you could probably get the public library on the other end to possibly help facilitate that. But so there are some things that you can do, phone interviews. So there are alternatives.
And there are really, if you're uncomfortable using Skype, or if you're working with someone older who's uncomfortable using Skype on their end, Radio Shack makes a very inexpensive adapter for a phone where you can plug your recorder directly into your phone and get full audio that way while still using the handset. So again, it's not perfect, but when Doug Boyd and I were doing some interviews for our book on oral history and digital humanities, that's how we did some of ours, and the quality was really surprisingly good, all things considered. So
we have a question from Merle here. She said, do you encourage the use of photos or personal items during the interview to spark memories or become distracted?
So I can answer this one. So oftentimes we do a lot of veterans interviews for the Veterans History Project at the Library of Congress. I think we're nearing 1,000 interviews in the last 4 years, so I'm excited about that. But oftentimes veterans will bring photographs, medals, memorabilia. We often don't pull them out at the beginning. What we do is kind of try to conduct the interview, and then at the end, if they want to discuss them. But yes, they are great. They often spark memories. They often, it's a good conversation. Although if you were having problems, really getting started, that would be a great way to put it in. The only caution I would say is we have done video interviews for that project that I work on. And we have to be careful that a lot of veterans will bring in their discharge papers and they'll hold it up for the camera and their social security number is listed on them. So we've had to go back and either blur them out or redact them. So that's really hard to do on video equipment. So just think about that ahead of time, that their social security number is not in any form. But otherwise, yes, I think it's a great way to spark memories. Absolutely.
And one of the things we recommend is, when possible, we try to do interviews in people's homes because they're surrounded by things that spark their memories there. This is, their home turf, and they have photos on the walls. They have artifacts, if you will. I started out as an archaeologist, so I think, but I mean things that are familiar to them and important to them that are all around their room. And those tend to be general memory joggers and mnemonic devices. So I think, anything you can do to help people make that connection, either consciously or subconsciously, always works. So.
Merlene asked a question. She said, is a digital recorder good for audio recording? Now, I'm assuming that all of the technology you showed on that website were digital. Is that the case?
Yes, all of them are digital. The only thing I would caution is what I mentioned earlier. There are some things that you can get at the big box stores that are little stick recorders, or the little memorandum recorders that will occasionally record in odd formats. So just look for something that can produce WAV files. But yes. Those will be great for that. The quality is absolutely amazing relative to what we used to get back in the day when we recorded with the cassette recorders. So, and you talk to college students about that now, and they look at you like you're older than dirt. And back when pterodactyls roamed the skies and God was a child, but. Having done this for 25 years, I mean, we used, most people used cassette recorders until up into the 90s at some point, and it's amazing the difference in quality.
I was going to say most of the 4,800 interviews we have were all done in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and early even 2000s. They're all done on like audio cassette tapes or reel-to-reel tapes and things. So, yeah, we deal with everything here.
Liz asked a question, interesting question about translation. If you're interviewing someone that speaks in a different native language, how do you handle that, and how do you deal with translating the interviews?
You want me to take this one, Jeff?
Yeah, sure. Okay. No, go ahead.
I worked up at the University of Alaska Fairbanks for a long time, and we worked a lot with Alaska Native communities. And in a lot of cases, while the elders we worked with might have spoken English, they were much more comfortable in Yupik or in Yupiaq or Athabascan. So what we used to do was to work with translators. So simultaneous translation, so that we had someone who could interpret what we were saying, and the elders could respond in Yupiaq or whatever, and then have that answer translated, and then we could still transcribe everything at the end, both English and in Yupiaq, so that if there was a question about whether the translations were accurate, because when you're translating in real time, it's harder to do. So from the scholarly standpoint, you would have those records afterwards, and you could look at them. We also had search capabilities, so people could search either in Yupiaq or in English for the written versions of things. But that's what most of my experience has been, although I do know some people who have, when we worked with some of the Basque communities in Nevada, when I was at the University of Nevada, the interviews were conducted in Basque and then translated into English after the fact, with a couple of different folks working on them to make sure that the transcriptions were correct. So there are a couple different ways to do that, but both are, I think, equally common. Jeff, have you been doing that with any of your interviews?
I can't think of any that come to mind that we've done that, but that's how I would approach it. Either have simultaneous translators or a translator doing it from English to the native language and back, or, yeah, I mean, that's how I would approach it, though.
You do want to be careful about gatekeeping, because sometimes that does become an issue. But if you have the recording and can go back and have a neutral party, take a look at the translations to kind of see if people were leaving anything out, that works. But that's usually not an issue. It's usually just more an issue of simultaneous translation being a tricky thing to do on the fly. So.
We have a couple more questions and just a couple more minutes. So let me quickly go to Erica's question. Can one of you please describe what metadata is and how you go about collecting it for your interviews?
Sure, I can talk about it. So on that checklist I'm talking about, I'm wanting basic information for the institution here. So name, phone number, address, email if they have one, date of birth and things. But I'm covering, usually at the beginning of each of my interviews, I'm covering some of that demographic information, or I will talk to the individual ahead of time. I will have over the phone, through correspondence, via the mail. But yeah, I want information, yeah, all the basics that you can think of, so that I can index it later. So all of our interviews, when we put them into the collection here, so we're an archive here, so everything has a collection and inventory, and then we're indexing things using Library Congress subject headings and terms. So I'll index things like names. I'll index, if they're a World War II veteran, I'll index, World War, 1939 to 1945, dash, U.S. Army or something along those lines, so that they can be found in our database, found on the PDF. We put the inventories online. So yeah, I try to get as many things possible when doing that. But basic things, and then I'll use index terms. So I'm looking for proper names and nouns in the interview, and I'll index those if it's feasible. And I just really want to direct patrons to them as best as possible. So I'll collect as much as I can.
I think we just have one more question. It's from Catherine. She says, I need to find out more about the free, simple but effective technology options. Can you give suggestions of some options?
There is some information on one of the Facebook sites, and I cannot think of the proper, I can't think of the proper title for it right now to get you there, but if anyone is interested in that information, if you want to send me an email, my email is mary.larson@okstate.edu, and we can send you that information afterwards. I'm sorry I can't remember it off the top of my head. I know it's a group that let's see, John Fenn, Doug Boyd, Andy Kolovos. There are a number of those folks on there who have been sending in information about recording with things like iPods or iPads or tablets. So you do want to make sure that whatever you do, that you can, however you do that you can record into a WAV format. I know there's something called Audacity that I believe records to WAV. It's free online. I think it's out of Australia. But you can record using that. There are a number of different apps out there. I think you just want to make sure that you're recording to a WAV format rather than something really highly compressed.
Thank you. I just have one more note, and this is mainly for Latino Americans grantees. Christine Navarro-McElhenney is one of our outreach consultants, outreach advisors for Latino Americans. If you went to the ALA conference in San Francisco for our orientation, you heard her speak there. She's terrific, and she wanted to make you all aware that she is still a resource for you, so her contact information is on the screen. Feel free to reach out to her with questions. She would be happy to help. And I would like to give a huge thanks to Jeff and Mary. This was such a fantastic presentation. We will be sending out an email with the resources in case you didn't get a chance to download them. And thank you both.
You're very welcome.
Thanks. It was fun.